is retired.
Yeah.
But if he never steps into the cage with you and you two never fight, what do you think that does for his legacy, but also for your legacy? Is it possible for you to be the best and be the greatest without beating him?
That's someone else's opinion, to be honest. It doesn't really matter to me.
That sort of stuff doesn't bother you,
No,
as long as you're fighting the people that are in front of you.
I can only control what I can control.
I mean, we've been talking to this kid forever about it, and it's his fight. Listen, you can't make people fight. If Jon doesn't want to fight, you can't make him fight. We can try to make him fight. We can throw things at him that inspire him to want to fight, but we'll figure it out.
And over the weekend, Dana White says he's retired. You were the Undisputed Champion. How are you feeling a few days after?
I mean, to be honest, I would have rather fought for it, but I did defend the interim though, which is a weird thing as well. To be honest, I always saw myself as a champion anyway. I think the whole Jon Jones thing was a bit weird. I think everybody can see that was a bit of a strange situation, but luckily now that is in the past and we can...
What makes a man a king? Is it the crown on his head or the fear he commands from the shadows? In the chaotic world of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, this question has never been more relevant. Officially, the UFC Heavyweight Champion is Tom Aspinall, a British powerhouse who earned the Undisputed title. But lurking just beyond the spotlight is a figure who casts a shadow over the entire division, Jon Jones, the man many consider the greatest of all time, the legend who never lost his belt in the octagon, has abdicated the throne only to reposition himself not as a former king, but as the hunter. This is the story of how one of the most prestigious titles in all of sports became the center of a labyrinthine saga of injury, controversy, and unprecedented political maneuvering, a story where the UFC itself seems to have lost the plot, leaving fans to wonder who the real king truly is. The chaos began with a single, sickening snap. In late 2023, the heavyweight division had a clear path forward. Jon Jones, having returned from a 3-year hiatus to dominate Cyril Gane and capture the vacant title, was set to defend his crown against the legendary Stipe Miocic at UFC 295 in New York's Madison Square Garden. It was a legacy fight, a battle of titans meant to cement Jones's place in history. But on October 25, 2023, that path was obliterated. During a routine wrestling practice, Jones suffered a catastrophic injury. As UFC CEO Dana White described it, he tore the tendon that connects your pec to the bone off the bone. The fallout was immediate and severe. The main event was canceled, and Jones was facing surgery and an estimated 8-month recovery period. This single moment of physical failure triggered a domino effect that would fracture the division's future. The UFC, needing a blockbuster main event for its massive New York card, made a crucial decision. Instead of simply postponing the championship fight, they created an interim title. This decision birthed two divergent, conflicting timelines that were destined to collide. One timeline belonged to Jones, a path focused on his recovery and an eventual legacy fight against Miocic, effectively ignoring the division's active contenders. The other timeline belonged to the division, which desperately needed to move forward. To fill the void at UFC 295, the promotion booked an interim title fight between the fearsome Sergey Pavlovich and a man who accepted the challenge on just 2.5 weeks' notice, Tom Aspinall. That decision, born from business necessity, guaranteed a future war for the throne. Tom Aspinall entered the championship picture like a lightning strike. Thrown into a title fight on perilously short notice, he faced a man he openly called a big, scary guy. In the lead-up, Aspinall was candid about his anxiety, admitting, "I've never been as scared in my life as fighting this guy." This raw honesty was a stark contrast to the calculated, invincible aura projected by Jon Jones. It made Aspinall instantly relatable, a human being stepping into a seemingly impossible situation. On November 11, 2023, inside Madison Square Garden, that fear gave way to ferocious brilliance. Aspinall needed only 69 seconds. He weathered an early storm from Pavlovich and then landed 2 devastating right hands to his opponent's temple, sending the Russian crashing to the canvas. The fight was over. As the referee stepped in, Aspinall didn't gloat or pose. He collapsed in tears, overcome by the sheer magnitude of the moment. He had become the first British heavyweight to win a UFC title, a historic achievement born from chaos. In doing so, he became the perfect narrative foil for Jon Jones.
International Fight Week deadline. Right here and now, I'm imposing this deadline. And by the way, they announced that they're going to do a press conference tour for Canelo Crawford, and one of the stops is June 27th, the day before Ilya versus Charles, International Fight Week, 317. I'm imposing an International Fight Week deadline. An announcement must be made. A decision must be made. That's when the eyes of the MMA world are on the UFC.
Where Jones was complex and controversial, Aspinall was straightforward and emotional. Where Jones often engaged in methodical, grinding victories, Aspinall was a whirlwind of explosive finishes, holding the record for the shortest average fight time in UFC history. The UFC didn't just get an interim champion, it got a natural protagonist. A new school hero whose humility and devastating power created an unavoidable collision course with the old guard. With the interim belt wrapped around his waist, Tom Aspinall entered a unique form of purgatory as Jon Jones recovered from his pectoral injury and then underwent a second surgery on his elbow. The heavyweight division ground to a halt. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Aspinall's reign as interim champion stretched past 535 days, surpassing Renan Barão to become the longest in UFC history. The wait was defined by a dizzying storm of conflicting messages that fueled fan frustration. On one side, Dana White repeatedly assured the public that a unification bout was inevitable. He called Jones versus Aspinall the biggest fight in heavyweight history and guaranteed it would happen in 2025, telling reporters the deal was done, but it's not done, and just a matter of getting contracts signed. Yet on the other side, Jon Jones seemed to be doing everything possible to undermine that guarantee. He publicly dismissed Aspinall as an unworthy challenger, instead calling for fights against other big names like former light heavyweight champion Alex Pereira. He suggested the only thing that could make him accept the Aspinall fight was an astronomical payday, bluntly telling the UFC to pay him FU money. This public back and forth became the promotion itself. It was a masterclass in narrative stalling, keeping the potential fight in the headlines for over a year without a single poster being printed. Aspinall, caught in the middle, grew increasingly frustrated. He felt the holdup was entirely on Jones' side, likely about money, and made it clear he would not defend the interim belt again, arguing that the champion's duty is to fight the top contender. A fan petition demanding Jones be stripped of the title gathered nearly 200,000 signatures, a clear sign that the public was tired of waiting. The division was in limbo, held hostage by the whims of its absent king. As the standoff intensified, the conflict began to revolve around the most polarizing aspect of Jon Jones's career, the ghost of his past scandals. His legacy as the potential greatest of all time is permanently marked for an asterisk for many, a consequence of being stripped of UFC titles 3 times for disciplinary actions and a history of failed drug tests. His record includes positives for substances like clomiphene, letrozole, and most notably, the anabolic steroid turinabol. This history became a weapon in the war of words. Tom Aspinall, a fighter who prides himself on clean competition, made his stance brutally clear. Without naming Jones directly, he condemned any fighter who uses performance-enhancing drugs in combat sports, calling them a piece of SH and sick individuals. The challenge was laid down, and Jones's response was as defiant as it was shocking. In a widely circulated social media comment, he fired back, "You silly gooses know, I never took steroids. The evidence is all there. Hence why I was able to fight again, and the rules have been changed for everyone across all sports. Call me the game changer." It was a masterful act of narrative jiu-jitsu. Jones wasn't simply denying the accusations, he was attempting to reframe his entire history. He has long argued that the amounts found in his system were minuscule, the equivalent of a pinch of salt in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and could not have enhanced his performance. But with his game-changer comment, he took this defense a step further. He positioned himself not as a cheater, but as a victim pioneer whose unique case was so complex it forced the entire anti-doping system to evolve. He was arguing that he was punished by an imperfect system that has since been corrected thanks to him. It was a bold strategy to control his legacy by discrediting the very framework that found him at fault. However, this defense was met with deep skepticism. Veteran MMA referee John McCarthy, for one, dismissed it bluntly, stating, "My kids lie to me too. The reason that Jon Jones was caught was because he took them." The battle for the belt had become a battle over the very definition of truth. Just as the tension reached its breaking point, the storyline took a stunning turn. On June 22, 2025, from a press conference in Baku, Azerbaijan, Dana White dropped a bombshell. "Jon Jones called us last night and retired. Jon Jones is officially retired. Tom Aspinall is the heavyweight champion of the UFC. The chase was seemingly over. The king had abdicated the throne." The MMA world was shocked. Aspinall himself found out when his phone began blowing up at midnight in the UK. His initial understated reaction was classic Aspinall. "Yeah, sweet." In a more formal statement, he declared his intention to bring stability back to the division, writing, "For you fans, it's time to get this heavyweight division going." An active, undisputed champion, he had consistently maintained that his goal was never about Jones personally, but about the belt and being an active fighter. He never just wanted to fight Jon. "Jung would have been a fantastic scalp to have on my record, but I was trying to get the belt," he explained. For a moment, it seemed like the division could finally move on. Aspinall was the undisputed champion and the controversy was over. But this was no simple retirement.
It was a strategic abdication. As the reigning champion, Jones was the hunted, obligated to defend his title against the #1 contender. The pressure from fans, media, and the UFC was immense. By retiring, he instantly shed that obligation and the baggage that came with it. He gave up the physical belt to regain total control over his own narrative, setting the stage for a return on his own, far more spectacular terms. The peace in the heavyweight division lasted less than 2 weeks. Just as the world was adjusting to the reality of an Aspinall championship reign, the story veered from a sports drama into the realm of the surreal. The catalyst was an announcement from an unlikely source, then President Donald Trump. At an America 250 event, Trump revealed a plan to celebrate the nation's 250th birthday in 2026 with a UFC fight card held on the grounds of the White House. A UFC spokesperson quickly confirmed that the organization was in discussions to make the unprecedented event happen. Suddenly, Jon Jones, the retired legend, stirred from his brief slumber. He took to social media with a cryptic post, "Fighting at the White House?" Almost immediately after, he announced that he had officially re-entered the USADA drug testing pool, a mandatory step for any fighter planning a return. The timing was no coincidence. Jones had found his escape route. The White House event provided him with a narrative superweapon, a spectacle so grand and historic it threatened to make a standard title defense against Tom Aspinall seem trivial by comparison. He could now bypass the entire divisional hierarchy. He wouldn't have to return as a former champion chasing the man who replaced him. He could return as a living legend, participating in a patriotic, once-in-a-lifetime cultural moment. It was a brilliant power play to change the entire game board and make the Aspinall problem irrelevant. With his return to the testing pool, Jon Jones had masterfully reset the power dynamic. He articulated his new status with a telling post on social media. "It feels nice to be the hunter and not the hunted for once." He was no longer the champion with obligations. He was now a special attraction, free to pick and choose his targets, and the entire MMA world was his hunting ground. This move, however, was seen by many as the ultimate duck, a calculated maneuver to avoid the single greatest threat to his legacy. No one understands the mind of Jon Jones better than his greatest rival, Daniel Cormier. Now an analyst, Cormier offered a sharp assessment of the situation. He argued that Jones isn't scared of fighting Aspinall in a physical sense. He is terrified of what a loss would mean. "If you're the greatest, go fight him," Cormier challenged, framing the entire saga as the ultimate test of Jones's claim to GOAT status. Cormier believes the Jon Jones of a decade ago, younger and in his prime, would have eagerly taken the fight. But today's older, slower Jones sees a different kind of risk in the younger, faster, and more powerful Aspinall. This entire saga is the ultimate exercise in legacy protection. Every move Jones has made since his injury can be viewed as a strategic calculation to avoid a specific narrative-destroying loss.
The initial plan was to fight the aging Miocic, a win that would add to his legend and a loss that would be forgivable. The emergence of Aspinall presented a far more dangerous scenario, a definitive defeat at the hands of a new generation champion that would signal the end of his era. The stalling, the retirement, and the shocking reversal tied to the White House event are all pieces of a complex strategy to avoid that fate. This isn't about fear of a knockout, it's about fear of narrative death. Jones is in a battle for the final word on his career, and he is manipulating the entire sport to ensure he gets to write that last chapter himself. From a single torn muscle to a global saga involving two champions, accusations of cheating, a phantom retirement, and the White House, the story of the UFC heavyweight title has become one of the most complex and compelling dramas in modern sports. It has transcended the octagon, becoming a fascinating study in power, legacy, and public relations. The final chapter remains unwritten, leaving two competing narratives. Is Jon Jones a master manipulator, a genius of self-promotion who is orchestrating his final, grandest performance on a stage of his own creation? Or is he a fading king, the GOAT who knows his time is up, strategically running from the one man who can definitively prove it? The hunter is circling, and the champion is waiting. The world is watching to see if their paths will finally, violently cross.